Now, take a look at these images. Really look at them. Do you know the difference between you and the people you see in them? Luck. If you're watching this, the chances are you're not fleeing war in Syria, poverty in West Africa, or repressive regimes in Eritrea and Egypt. You're probably not pregnant, having been raped in Libya, risking your life on a dinghy, or trying to keep your small children safe in a French forest while the authorities regularly come and raze the little shelter you've built. That is the reality facing the human beings whose plight we have come to dismissively refer to as the migrant crisis. Unlike Italy, where 85,000 people have arrived this year alone, we in Britain tend to ignore this as much as possible, hoping that by distancing ourselves further from Europe, we can make the problem go away. Now Bill Gates has stepped into the fray, claiming that Europe must make it more difficult for Africans to reach the continent via the current transit route. I wonder if he has any idea just how difficult things already are. We must not mistake the fact that people are somehow bearing the horror of this journey with the idea that it's bearable. It's not. There are solutions, but making conditions more inhumane than they already are is not one of them.
Afua, you asked in your intro if Bill Gates has any idea how bad things are. This is a man who now devotes his life to philanthropy. It's a man who, in the past few years, has spent £30 billion on the very kind of people that are in these pictures. And I think what he did by saying this, and let's look at the quote of exactly what he said. Let's look at this quote. On the one hand, you want to demonstrate generosity and take in refugees. But the more generous you are, the more word gets around about this, which in turn motivates more people to leave Africa. Another thing he said, Germany cannot possibly take in the huge number of people who are waiting to make their way to Europe. This unfortunately means you have to make it more difficult for Africans to reach the continent via the current transit route. Now, there was a leaked story in a German government report in a German newspaper this week which said 6.6 million people are waiting to come. Yeah. To cross the Med. 2 million of those are Africans. Now, already this year, figures that we know already, 85,000 people in Italy alone have hit Italian ports. They've predicted that by the end of this year, that would be 250,000. That's a city the size of Verona. Afua. That means every year in Italy alone, a city the size of Verona is going to come. But also, Italian authorities are saying that the people coming now aren't people fleeing war zones. They're not desperate. They're not desperate people who need to escape brutality or whatever. These are 7 out of 10, well, actually, no, 82% are economic migrants. So they're not the people that you describe. They're not people who are fleeing countries that are war-torn. They're not people who are starving. They're people who want a better life. And I completely get that. But the bottom line is you cannot squeeze the whole of Africa and every other country into Europe. It's not fair on the people living in Europe. There just isn't the money or the resources to deal with that.
So I don't disagree with you, and if you're hoping for me to kind of defend the idea that I don't think that I think that we can have unlimited numbers of migrants coming to Europe and that's sustainable. I don't. So that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying this is a problem. I question the language that Bill Gates used around generosity. For me, these people are coming. That is a problem. It's not just a problem because it's not sustainable for Europe. It's a problem because so many of them are dying en route. The number who died last year is increased by 42%.
Okay, but
nobody thinks this is a good...
That is the fault of evil traffickers who don't care how many people die. They send them out to sea in inflatable dinghies and they drown. That is not the fault of Europe or any of the authorities in Europe. That's the fault of the traffickers who are taking the money.
Just before everyone else comes on, I'll tell you a point I'm hoping to debate, and you can all ignore me if you want, but it's not the question of whether it's great that all of these people are risking their lives and being abused trying to get into Europe. That's not good. What I'm hoping we'll debate is whether Bill Gates is right in saying that the way to solve this problem, which we all acknowledge, I think, is a problem, is to make conditions more difficult.
Yes.
I personally think that is highly misguided. I know Bill Gates. I'm very familiar with his work. I've worked with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, has spent $30 billion fighting poverty, and he understands poverty from that perspective. But I'm questioning why the idea that conditions aren't already basically as inhumane as they possibly can be. So where's the evidence that making life more difficult is going to be a deterrent? Where's the evidence?
The Aussie Prime Minister who's been here this week, he said that if you control illegal immigration, people coming in illegally, economically, like the economic migrants, you can be more generous to genuine refugees, to people who are genuinely in trouble. That makes total sense to me. And I suppose the way to stop people getting away is to have a European flotilla across Libyan waters. Don't let them take to sea, because that's where they die. Well, that's the problem.
Just to go back to Bill Gates's point, what Bill Gates was saying is that actually we need to be investing more in those countries. Yes. Yes. So Bill Gates, unlike you, Nick Ferrari, is in favour of spending more on foreign aid for this very reason. And what we also mustn't forget is when we intervene in these regions, this is what happens a lot of the time. So we have to be looking at what we're doing in country, and that's why I'm in favour of spending more on foreign aid, because that's how you deal with these issues. If you make their own country safe, if you make sure there's good governance where they're from, they are not going to want to come here. And back to your point on economic migrants,
there's enough in the budget
my parents were economic migrants. And isn't your husband?
Completely.
So I think sometimes let's not confuse the two arguments, because in doing so we demonise economic migrants
I'm
to
not
make
trying
it seem
to
as if
demonise
it's a bad thing.
What I'm trying
to say is that my family have contributed to Britain, and your husband certainly has. He picked a wonderful wife.
Yes. Good point. Good point.
Made it honest woman.
It took a long time. I was quite but anyway. Somebody actually said to him once, as a joke, you're marrying her to get a passport. And he said, there are much easier ways to get a passport. It's 250 quid for a fake passport.
Suffered enough on the Libyan waters.
But seriously, no one is trying to demonise people about it. I get people everywhere when they want to come to Europe. It's a great life, of course it is. But Europe cannot sustain every other country in the world coming here.
We all
agree with that.
We're just saying the solutions are different.
Like Afua, I have also met Bill Gates.
You've had dinner with him?
No, I haven't. I met him once, and I had a 25-minute conversation, and it sort of went like this. I think what you're doing in terms of child mortality, in terms of eradicating diseases, communicable are fantastic.
Malaria.
But what are you doing to address the problems of overpopulation in sub-Saharan Africa and so on, which are leading to these push and pull pressures and the migration crisis? And he said, the evidence shows that if you eradicate childhood mortality and so also bring it down, people have fewer children. But I said, please make this your next mission. As we saw in all the news today, we're having species extinction. If we want to save the planet, we've all got to have fewer children or less children. I never know which one it is. So we've got to put that into the mix here. The reason we have a migration crisis is that the countries they come from are not viable. They're not sustaining their populations. They're dangerous. They're not productive. They're not economic. So we have to fix it on the ground.
We've also played a role in some of that. So we better
of course,
also...
Iraq, Syria and Afghanistan are big countries.
Yeah.